Today is October 11th, also known as National Coming Out Day. A day where gay, lesbian, and transgender Americans all kind of come together and share their coming out experiences and just kind of acknowledge that they are an out and proud member of the community to spread awareness and kind of showcase themselves as individuals who can lend a bit of support to those of us that are still struggling with accepting ourselves or reaching a place in coming out. I myself have actually never had a real formal coming out story of any kind. I was more or less closeted throughout high school, and then as I transitioned into college, I kind of just got into a relationship with another guy, and people just kind of figured it out here and there slowly over time. Before you can really come out to anybody else, you kind of have to come out to yourself. And that is something that I struggled with in my experiences. It took me a long time, I would argue till about my junior to senior year of high school before I had actually came out to myself. I refused to even say the words, "I'm gay," for an incredibly long time. And I also had a lot of social awkwardness that actually follows me to this day as an adult. When I was growing up as a kid, I had this group of friends that lived in the neighborhood. They essentially lived a street over from me, or I had a friend who lived right next door to my house, some other friends that lived across the street, and we would all hang out each and every single day together. So for the majority of my entire childhood life, these were the people that I would self-describe as my closest and best friends. They were the people that I saw each and every single day after school. And we all had bikes, and we would just kind of bike over to each other's houses to go hang out. And there was a certain period of time where I stopped getting phone calls or the invites to go hang out with these friends. And there was one day specifically that would just become the first of many days in the future, where I saw the bikes stationed outside of my friend's house who happened to live next door, but I didn't get a phone call over. I didn't get the invite to go hang out. And this first experience, I had kind of just presumed, oh, they must have forgotten. So I run over to go next door and hang out with them, but I stop short of the door because I can hear them across in the room talking, and I hear my name being used in conversation. So I stop and listen, and they're essentially having a little I Hate George hangout. Each of these friends was taking turns sharing their own stories and comments about how much they hated me as a person and didn't want me around. That hits hard when it's the people you think that hits hard coming from the people that you would describe as your closest friends at that time. And it was something that ended up being ongoing because I didn't confront them right away about it. So for a long period of time, I would sometimes hang out with them while still listening and knowing that they didn't like me, and I would try harder to get them to like me, but the stories just kept coming. I would continually hear them share stories about how much they hated me, because at this point, it was almost like an addiction. I started eavesdropping on their conversations because I just couldn't turn myself away when I would see them hanging out without me. And so, even up through today as an adult, I have an extremely hard time picking up on social cues from people, and I have a really hard time distinguishing between whether the people that I refer to as my friends today are people that also think of me as a friend and people that enjoy my company and want me around, or if they are people that are, for lack of a better term, humoring me and being polite in my presence, because that's generally a thing that people do. Most people tend to not be outwardly mean. It's very difficult for me to hold a conversation with somebody, especially if they are someone newer that I'm meeting, because I struggle with figuring out if that person actually wants to be talking to me or if they would really rather not. And so I bring this up because during my times later in middle school and in high school, as I was trying to make new friends, I also struggled really hard with other people's perception of me and whether or not people were going to hate me. And naturally, having feelings towards other men didn't exactly help that scenario. I was also going to school in a pretty interesting time in terms of LGBT rights. I remember in school gay and lesbian rights being brought up a lot inside of the classroom, and it was due to the fact that in my time as a teenager, I was kind of living in this world where a lot of the absolutely massive strides in gay rights were being propagated by the work of activists from before my time. I was growing up in a time period where, while I was in school, Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. The individual states in our country were slowly, one by one, legalizing same-sex marriage. In 2011, at the end of my sophomore year of high school, New York State, where I live, legalized same-sex marriage. I remember in middle school, Katy Perry's I Kissed a Girl song came out and it was playing on the radio. And at the time period in my middle school, the teachers would play the public radio during like study hall periods or free periods at the beginning and end of the school day. And when Katy Perry's song I Kissed a Girl would come on the radio, the teachers would actually freak out. And they actually banned the radio from the classrooms because it was considered controversial. A song about a girl kissing another girl was considered taboo. And because there was a lot of new legislation happening, there were a lot of instances while I was in school kind of passively sitting and listening to my peers, the other students who I went to school with, get into arguments and debates with each other in classes where they started getting into fights over their support or objection to the legislation that was being proposed. And that also felt very weird, sitting as this person who, still in my own skin, didn't feel comfortable admitting that I was gay, listening to people argue and fight over gay rights as if gays were like some kind of barn animal and we had to decide what should we do with these things, didn't feel good. And I'm trying to reflect on those feelings now as an adult, looking back on a teenager, because gay teenagers specifically do have a 5-fold increased likelihood of committing suicide compared to their heterosexual counterparts. And a lot of that can be ingrained in school culture. The absolute most basic and most commonly thrown insult in a school classroom are anti-gay slurs. Usually that's the jock students are throwing at each other to make fun of each other. And to the closeted gay kid that's sitting in a classroom just listening day in and day out to people calling each other gay as an insult because being gay is funny, because being gay is stupid, it's something that puts your head into an environment where you just feel like it's something that is wrong and it's the absolute last thing that you want to be. And you almost live in denial about it for a period of time. I did, in my senior year of high school, formally come out to 2 people. They were 2 female students that I was very close to in high school. One of them I had actually dated for maybe a day and a half. Obviously that wasn't going to have worked out. And even in my first couple years of college, when I entered my relationship with my ex at the time, I remember time periods where we would have these public displays of affection and I would feel uncomfortable with the stares and the head turns that people would give. The most specific example that I can recall happening time and time again would be, there were periods of time in college where my ex-boyfriend and I had these periods of long-distance relationships. Because my hometown was Buffalo, but I was going to school in New Jersey and he lived in Pennsylvania. And so when I would go home for these breaks, he would always drive me to the train station, so I would take my train and leave, and right before I would board the train, we would kiss goodbye. And I just remember always being hyper aware every time I would give him a kiss in public, like that kiss goodbye before I would go on the train, and just having in my periphery the side eyes and the head turns from other people that were taking their looks. And so I think having this environment today where you have, with social media and now even mainstream television, you've got countless representations of gay Americans. It is something that I think is incredible to serve the youth to find people that they connect with. And so I promise you that if you are someone who is struggling, if you're someone who's having feelings that you feel like you don't quite understand, it does absolutely get better. When you get to that place where you've got the confidence in who you are, where you're no longer restricted to that classroom environment and you have the freedom to be an adult, you will find some pride and happiness, and it will be genuinely awesome. So keep fighting and be the most authentic you that you can be. Happy National Coming Out Day.